Well, good morning, Jamie.
Good morning.
Yeah, this is great. I so appreciate you taking the time this morning to share your journey with Red Clover. So you're in Whitefish, Montana, and
What?
yep, and I'm in Silver City, New Mexico. We're finally on the same time zone because for
Finally.
years we've been having to do the time exchange. So it's nice to be on the same time with you. And I've been thinking about this journey that we've been on together, not only your journey with Red Clover, but our journey. And I was thinking, I think it's been like 13 years, 12 years. Let's see.
So
It, 20,
2011 or 12 is when I think I went to
2011,
Africa.
2020. Wow. And so I met you when you were in herbal medicine school.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about that. What drew you to go to herbal medicine school and where you're at now with your herbalism.
Yeah, I can't really remember like a time when I was like, oh, I need to go do this, but I think it was just kind of an accumulation from life. I always felt I was raised, with a lot of Western medicine, like always taking antibiotics, but I was really, really sensitive as a kid, as a child. And so I just remember every time I'd take those, just like feeling something, I couldn't like voice it or anything, but everything was just so harsh and like it just seemed hard to like work in that way. And it was like, not having anyone like speak a language to you or I didn't know that there was any other way at the time. It was just like a feeling. And so over time, these little pieces come to you, just kind of like you came to me. And I'll share that story in a little bit. And they open up. And I think I must have taken like a plant or something and realized it worked and been curious. And um, I was lucky enough to be raised in the woods. My grandparents were farmers and my whole family, they're hunters. So I was always in the woods playing. And I think that, you know, gave me that relationship
Nice.
with nature. So I don't remember why, really. There wasn't like a moment, but it was just over time, these like little pieces that were like, oh my gosh, but what if and what if? And then, you
You
know,
were curious.
I was curious.
Yeah, and you had that connection to nature. That's such an important piece. And I was thinking about that in relation to what we're going to talk about today, because we're living in such a sensory deprived world. I mean, not that the world is sensory deprived, but people are depriving themselves of being in a sensory world with the technology the way it's unfolding. And what you were talking about is like, when you take a pharmaceutical like an antibiotic, it bypasses go. It doesn't collect $200. It goes directly into the system. It bypasses all of the sensory inputs that we have to that's why herbal medicine is so safe. We smell it, we taste it, we swallow it, we digest it, we eliminate it, we come into relationship with it. But there's that sensory piece, of being able to see, touch something and smell something and be in relationship with it rather than just, fix me quick, take a pill and not have that relationship. And then ultimately it ends up wreaking some kind of habit or havoc, or you've got to deal with the complication that causes because you're interrupting a natural flow of a system. So that's cool. We're nature girls.
Nature. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel you to be surrounded by nature. I realize like we're kind of a small percentage of the world. A lot of people have been raised in cities on top of themselves and they don't have a choice just to get that start early on with that connection.
So true. My heart breaks for these kids that are living in a 2D reality and not even, I have somebody who I know here where I live who has a 14-year-old and he thinks he has a social life, but that social life is not in any other world other than on his device.
Mm.
So yeah, it's heartbreaking. but I'm grateful that you had that. I'm grateful that I had that. So maybe we can share a little bit of that, that early experience, pay it forward, and as we continue to walk in beauty, I really believe that, as we walk in beauty, we pay beauty forward. And beauty, it's all around us, but we have to step into it. We have to embrace it. And yeah, so, and I know you had a little cold recently, and so, that seems apropos that you would talk about how that was the beginning of your experience of realizing that you weren't going to just run for an antibiotic. So I suspect you didn't just run for an antibiotic, right? And it just gets to move through you because you've got an immune system. That's what our immune system is for. And yeah, so tell us about how how you're living in the world now. And I know you're in a lot of nature where you are right now. Whitefish, Montana, that's got to be amazing. And I hope I get to get up there one of these days. I have been to Banff Lake Louise and some of the beautiful places up there. But yeah, so just share a little bit more with us about how you handle your health challenges, because we all have them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of the language that I'm going to use is going to be your words. So, your voice is often in my mind just because you're the one who shared with me like the wise woman tradition, and which the first law or rule or like sharing in that is like do nothing. So first things first is like I always just take a second and maybe just honor my body and its innate intelligence, and know that it has the support. And even I was thinking a lot about this, just like revisiting red clover, and I have a little infusion because
Look
um,
at you.
I'm just kind of getting over a like a little sinus infection. So that just recently happened, and I had, my lomatium tincture and a little bit of usnea, and so I was working with that and just some ginger. And I was like, oh, I should, work with red clover and just like clear out the rest of it because it's also like gentle for like sinus and lymph. But I think the conversation I want to go into a little bit more with you is like the whole plant, whole body healing. And
Mm.
even me just thinking this morning, I'm like, well, I'd really like to clear out the rest of my lymph, you know? And it's like, but I'm curious, like there's so much more that like the plant is doing, the relationship is doing, and what does it mean to be in relationship with your medicine beyond even like the spirit. I was reading Your Divination from Wisdom of the Plant Devas, and I kind of sunk into this meditation, and it was almost like it's like a language we don't know yet, or we know very well but that we just have to remember. So that's kind of like where I'm at right now. And of course, I'm still kind of using like a bit of a Western model and a whole plant model as I like journey with that. And I think it's a language sharing with people that, they know, so it may inspire them. Um, I heard this from someone else, but they're like, if you can get someone, not get someone, but you give someone a dandelion tincture and maybe it helps their digestion or helps their belly or something. It's something noticeable for them. And they're like, hey, that worked. And then they ask the question to you, was that the same dandelion that's in my backyard? And it's like they're still thinking like, well, does this help my tummy or my liver or whatever? But then they're curious. So like, what if everybody was curious and everyone was questioning like what would the new relationship and the new language be?
It's really a language of love, isn't it?
Yeah, I wrote that down actually. So it's right.
Yeah, it's because it's a heart connection, it's like this disconnect that we talk about with this, disconnect from nature. But I mean, we're living in with so much disconnect. And what you just described is a reconnect. And so when we talk about disconnect, there's in Chinese medicine, it's heart mind. Heart mind is not seen as a separate thing. Mind and heart are not seen as a separate thing. It's seen as one thing. And all mental illness in that model is a heart-mind disconnection. So, when we speak that language of love that you're talking about, love for ourselves, that we would love ourselves enough to be willing to do whatever it takes to be more healthy. Just basically, I know a lot of people that means different things to different people, but that curiosity of like what else is possible, what kind of health is possible. And that's one of the beauties of red clover is it's an alternative. So that is not understood by Western medicine. They don't, we almost could call it magic, right? In some ways, but what it does is it increases our it supports metabolism in that it is aiding our digestion, it's aiding our assimilation, it's aiding our elimination. So it's just making that whole system more effective. So it just goes through and those channels, and it kind of opens up all those channels like you're talking about with the lymph, and it just makes everything work better so the body can do. It's so supportive to the body on such a fundamental level because it's just aiding the body to do what it's already naturally designed to do. And that's why Western medicine can't understand that. It's like, well, no, we have to make it do something, we have to, we need to be able to. So coming back to the whole plant medicine, it's like in Western medicine, it's a mechanistic model. So we're going to do something to get a particular, result. And so that's why people are saying, well, can I take this for that? Rather than realizing that it's about restoring whole bodily systems and supporting the body to do. That's the wise woman tradition. And the reason that the first step in that tradition is to do nothing is because you're checking in. You're just being present. Is like so often we operate out of fear. It's like, well, I got to get this done today. So I got to take this so I can get this done, or I've got this, or give me this so it'll fix it now. And or if you don't do this, you don't get this surgery immediately, you're going to die, or whatever all that is. So the do nothing is huge, right? Just to be able to sit and be present with what is going on in our body, what is going on around us, what is the resonant frequency, what is this, what, it didn't just land on us, it's like we're in relationship with it. Why is this showing up? And then what do you do with that?
Yeah, can you be present with the pain? Can you be present with the discomfort? And maybe that's a privileged thing to say because my pain and discomfort's been rather, minimal compared to some where it is like on the brink of like maybe, death or something really serious. But maybe use that as a tool in those times where it isn't quite as serious. Like, can you be present with it? And what's there for you?
Yeah, because it's serving something. Pain serves to alert us to what is going on. And I always like to bring it back to childbirth, just because that's been my experience as a midwife in helping women to birth normally, that they have to be able to be present with that pain. But it's a functional pain. So it's kind of different, because it's like it's intense. But I think we've done women a great disservice to say, oh, it's not painful, and they're not well prepared. So the natural stress of labor then becomes distress. But that natural stress and it's painful. But if a woman is prepared for that, psychologically and emotionally and physically, then when she's present with it, it's like, you're an outdoor person. You're a kayaker, right? So it's like when I would imagine going through some rapids or your kayak gets turned over, or, it's like, well, you must have to be so present with whatever is going on to navigate that. And labor's the same way. It's like riding the waves and having some tools, like knowing how to flip your boat back over,
Yeah.
having some tools. And I think that's what herbal medicine gives us. It gives us, and certainly that's why I love teaching 5 element, because the tools are, it's holistic. It's physical, psychological, emotional, mental. It's, we have all of these bodies. We are not just a physical body, and it's not just a physical plant. And I like what you said earlier about beyond the spirit of a plant, is that, but that's the beautiful thing, is that it's all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, I think red clover is such a good plant to work with on that. Like presence is kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying. It's like, can we be present? And and red clover isn't really a plant that has like a lot of volatile oils or fragrance, so it's not one of those things you're gonna like smell it and immediately be like, have some sort of like sensory like reaction. But then if you really do smell it, like I can open this up and I just smell like the grass and the field that it was grown in and
The minerals.
the minerals.
And it is sweet. I mean, clover is sweet. I like putting those
Yeah.
little flower petals in my salads.
Yeah. And so it's subtle, but really like if you're present with subtlety, I think that has like can sometimes be like grander and a much greater effect than something that like hits you hard right away, but maybe just then you kind of lose the rest of your sensory because it was like so intense.
Mm.
Where is it in the rest of your body? Um, and
Yes.
so that's kind of coming back to red clover. I actually haven't worked with it in maybe a year or so. So this inspired me to get to know it again. And I almost got a little sad. I was like, wow, I don't really actually know you. Like I feel like I've always used you, but like I don't really
Mhm.
know you. And it made me think about even just like my relationship with humans and how we're in relationship. And I was like, wow, I think to the extent that like this has been up for me anyways, just like, authenticity and relationship. And it's like the extent that you can like open your heart and really know a human, or what is the extent that you could know your medicine, like how well and how present can you be with everything that has spirit.
Well, that used to get me in trouble in herbal medicine school, because we met when I was teaching a class at the school you were going to. And, the schools want you to learn over 100 herbs. And I used to say, you know what, if you know just 4, like really know them, then you've got, I mean, like, we know Susan Weed, she recommends taking 1 herb and working with it for an entire year, which I think is brilliant. And so that's what I teach too. And it's like, so the students are like, well, how do we graduate if we have to know 125 herbs? And you're saying we're going to talk about 1. But the truth is if you follow that plant through all of its seasons, right? You have to follow it through all of its seasons and work with its medicines on the full moon and the new moon, and when is it rising, and what is its personality, what is it, where does it grow, what does it like to grow next to, when does it raise its medicine, when does it descend its medicine. There's so much to learn about a plant, that to take 1 year with it, and then if you just know 4 plants like that, you've got 4 powerful allies to work with.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful way of thinking about it. And I love that Georgia O'Keeffe quote, where, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, but it's something like, it takes time to have a friend, like it takes time to see a flower. They
Mm,
put that on a postage stamp one year, that quote, and I thought that was so cool. And
that is
it's like,
true.
yeah, the time. And I think that was the do nothing part. It's like, if you don't stop long enough to be willing to take the time, and that's so much, so many, so so many people are time broke, right? And
Yeah.
so how do we really heal, and how do we really come into that wholeness if at the starting gate we're already time broke?
Mm,
So just gifting ourselves with a little bit more time to make a friend with a plant like you're talking about. It's a pretty cool thing. Um, yeah, I appreciate your products that you make too. I took some of your bear grass elixir this week, and so I know that you make medicines with the plants that grow very close to you, like right outside your door.
Yeah.
And there's so much to be said for that. That's why I love, Willie Whitefeather was a medicine man I got to work with here in the desert Southwest many years ago. And he would always say, your medicine is no further than you are right now. Actually, that's my quote. He didn't quite say it like that, but he would say, look down, you're standing on your medicine. And then I just came to realize, our medicine is no further than we are right now. And red clover's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Isn't that amazing? It's showing up for a reason. It wants to, support us. Those plants evolved concurrently with us, adjusting their chemistries to match our chemistries. And, that's no accident. So I do think the future of medicine and a lot of what I'm going to talk about, we know there's a Red Clover conference coming up, and
Mhm.
I'm very excited about. So we're going to, dispel the fear around phytoestrogens in that conference. And I will post wherever this video gets posted, I'll post that information. But anyway, I lost my train of thought, what I was going to say about that.
Yeah, I think that's what's so beautiful. When you first start, I mean, I did it, and it's something that's like I'm very wary of sharing like wildcrafting with other people. And it's not for me to control, but also it's like you have this thing when you first learn how to like make medicine and wildcraft, like take. Oh my gosh, I saw bloodroot. I want to make medicine of it, or these things that are like few and far between. And really like that's not, I mean, that's not the mindset I have now, but it's like we should be back to the earth, like learning how to make these medicines. And what a beautiful gift to use something like red clover. It's like replenishing itself all the time. There's an abundance of it. Dandelion. And those are all showing up at a time. Like think about dandelion. I think it gets overlooked a lot because it is so easy to find or get, or it's abundant. You don't have to like go to the faraway land and find the mystery. It's like right there for us in this time where our body, our liver needs support from everything that's going on in the environment. And like you said, it evolved with us.
Yeah,
um,
and seasonally in the springtime, right now I mentioned dandelion. This is the perfect time to be doing dandelion. And I remember what I was going to say was about coming back to the whole plant medicine and how. So the talk that I'm going to give in the Red Clover conference is called the Holy Trinity of Red Clover, past, present, and future. And that future is coming back to using whole plant medicine. It's like we've taken it apart and taken it apart and taken it apart to its smaller and smaller. I mean, that's the reductionist view. That's the Western view is a reductionist. The Eastern view is holistic and a gestalt. So I think and both are necessary, but we've gotten a little bit too far off in the reductionist mind. And now we need to come back to the holistic mind and look at what it means to use a plant in its whole form for the synergy that it carries. And red clover is a perfect example of that. And that's what I believe is the future of herbal medicine, is to come into a greater understanding of how to use these plants in their whole plant form, because there's a synergy there that we don't get when we, many years ago, I've worked in health food stores. Oh my gosh, so let's see, so for 40 years, off and on, I've worked in health food stores. And I remember back in the day when they were packaging red clover as a phytoestrogen to take for female hormone imbalance.
yeah.
And but it's that's been extracted and concentrated. So what happens when we use it in the form like you're drinking an infusion is that it's more easily digested, is more easily assimilated. The body recognizes it. It allows you to come into relationship with it. You're handling, well, ultimately maybe harvesting the plant, handling the plant, making the medicine, drinking the medicine, and then, then that becomes almost like a ritual, it becomes a sacred ritual. And that we've lost, are losing the sacred in so many areas of our lives.
Mm. Yeah, that the phytoestrogen piece reminds me of how I actually met you and like the journey of red clover. Can I share that?
Yes, please.
It's shifting, topics a little bit because I want to go back to the whole plant, but um, I had just gone. Before I went to herb school, which is where I met you, I went to the Appalachian School of Holistic Herbalism in North Carolina. And just before that, I was diagnosed with cervical dysplasia, which now it's, I have a lot of thoughts on that. But at the time, it was the tools that I had. I went to my annual pap smear and they'd given me this, oh, you have cervical dysplasia. We want to cut your cervix out until like all the cells are gone. And I was like, this is crazy. I hadn't gone through like my herbal journey yet, but I knew that like I was on more of a, I don't know, holistic journey. So I'd found this naturopath. I was in Washington at the time and went through this really expensive protocol, with herbs. She was Ayurvedic, but it was expensive and it was the tools I had at the time. And sure enough, 6 months later, my pap came back completely normal. And it's been that way ever since. But a few months later, I went to herb school and I met you, and you were teaching our materia medica. I believe that's what you were
I
teaching.
think it was herbs and pregnancy, wasn't it?
Maybe,
Or,
yeah,
or
yeah,
herbs and women, what?
yeah,
For the
because you,
female reproductive
yeah,
year, or something like that.
and there was something about, I really didn't know anything at that time, but just like your language or your presence, I was like, I need to know her. And I approached you and asked if we could apprentice. And then sure enough, you kept me hanging, but you said yes. Just kidding. So that's how we got to know each other. But you shared your story. I think I'd shared that with you, and you shared a story about what you were going through. I hope it's okay I share this.
Yeah.
It was like you were near menopause and you had had an irregular pap, and um I think they also wanted to do something invasive and cut me off if I'm telling the story incorrectly, but that's what I remember at the time. And you were like, absolutely not. I'm going to wait and go do some red clover infusions. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And we had just started working with it. We were harvesting it, and that was a plant that we were working with
I
together.
remember going up on the beautiful hill that was just covered with red clover, and we were like two little kids or fairies playing in the field
Yeah,
collecting all this red clover.
yeah. And that just like opened up. It was like a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, trust yourself. Like, wait, what if I could have just like, because it was scary when someone's like, well, if you do this, then if you don't do this, then you could get cancer or die or whatever. And it's like, well, first of all, don't buy anyone else's diagnosis. For me, this is my, you know,
Mm, hmm
um,
hmm
and just wait. And I'd already like in my body just trusted red clover. I was like, oh wow, there's thousands of dollars I could have saved. And it was like right there. I'm with
Mm.
it now. And so shortly after that, my mom was going through breast cancer, and she asked me to do an herbal protocol for it, and you'd help me with it. And one of the big things with it was red clover infusions. And so it was really cool to be able to introduce that to my mom, and she did it. And I thought she was going to be like, oh, this tastes terrible, but she loved it. She's like, I actually really like it. And she like had this trust, and she's clear. And years later, she's like, I was thinking I need some more of that red clover. So she still drinks red clover infusions, and it's opened up a
Beautiful.
world for her as well because
Wow.
she's been on this journey with plants. Um,
Wow.
and so, yeah,
It's so true. It's like information. We just need more information sometimes. So I think that's so the second step or the third, is to gather information, right? And so in a situation like you've encountered or your mother encountered or I encountered, I knew enough to know that it was not unusual to have a positive, pap smear during menopause. But the doctors have to cover their ass, so they're going to take, the most aggressive route. And for me, it was they were wanting to do more aggressive testing, or I think at that point they wanted to go in and, have a scrape or whatever they were going to do. And I said, no, I said, I'm in menopause, right? And it's not unusual for a woman to have a positive pap smear going through menopause. And he said, yeah, well, you were right, but we don't tell most people that. I just was like, wow.
Oh my.
So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll be back in 6 months or whatever it was. And sure enough, I came back and there was a negative, and it was been negative since. But see, women who don't know that, who then don't follow those, the steps, and I'll post those again, wherever this gets posted, I'll share those the stages of healing
Mm,
Susan Weed has given us, which are really important. So if most people would have just jumped to doing the most aggressive thing, but every intervention creates some type of a complication, and that then requires another intervention to deal with the complication of the first intervention. And what if we could just restore? Or what with me, I was like, let's just wait, right? Let's try this, let's try that. We don't need to rush into anything. These things take a long time to develop. And that's really the grace of herbal medicine, is that if something took 6 years to unfold, in other words, by the time you were presenting with, a symptomatic picture, that's been a process. And that's why I love Chinese 5 element, is because it's a diagnostic lens that helps us to recognize the patterns that have led up to a particular picture of the symptoms. So by the time you're presenting with symptoms that seem like an emergency, it's taken, so I'm just going to use 6 years as an example. Well, in 6 months, you can completely restore that with herbal medicine. That is the grace of herbal medicine, and it's its tonic ability. So there's maybe a difference we need to talk about there too, is that, there are, and we were talking about pain. It's like, yes, there are herbs that are anodynes that will help to relieve pain, but the longest lasting results from herbal medicine is in its tonic ability to restore whole bodily systems. And that means taking it consistently over a period of time. That in and of itself is a spiritual practice, in my opinion. To do anything like that consistently over time, that is, and that you are embodying, and that is restoring. So it's very restorative. And red clover, because of its mineral content, its incredibly high mineral content, is so restorative. So many women that I see in my practice that have, some kind of hormone imbalance related, condition, is just by remineralizing,
mm,
about 90% of that comes back online,
wow.
because we can get it from the infusions. It's again in a form that the body can digest and assimilate.
Mm. Yeah, that's so interesting. It takes patience, right? I think we're so used to that quick hit. Like I'm drinking a cup of coffee that makes me awake. I'm doing this a lot today. I feel awake. I
Quotes
need
are
to do
good.
that. Um, but the patients, I remember when I was seeing clients for a little while, a lot of them happened to be with women's health, and um, a couple of them, or one woman, it hurt my feelings because I was just starting, and I didn't really know how to deal with it. But overnight, her sleep formula didn't work, or she was having like hot flashes and it didn't work. And she came back and she's like, I don't want to follow through with this. None of this is working. And I was just, really sad at the time. I was young in it, and just like that's not true. Like you didn't even give it a chance. And I think we're just so used to taking something that's like so heavy hitting, and you like right away you feel something. And if you don't like feel that immediately, like I'm going to be better today, then like throw it out the door because I don't have time or the presence for this. um
That's a really good point. I know you've mentioned at a couple of times. It's like, that's just a really good point.
Mm.
Because, and especially if you're trying to rebalance hormones, it's going to take a minimum of 3 months. You have to cycle, and so if we come in, I used natural birth control through my fertile years. And I think so many women, whether they use it or not, would do well to know how to do that one,
Mm.
because you're paying attention to the rhythms and the cycles and the full moons and the new moons and the rhythms and the seasons and the cycles. There's so much. It sounds so simple, but there's really so much that we have to learn about how we are in relationship with those cycles. So with a hormonal cycle, it has to cycle at least 3 times in order for that readjustment, or that what's being restored, to bring it back online. So, you're right. And compliance is huge. And, it's like the follow through. It's like that's what I mean by the spiritual practice of consistency. You know, you have to be consistent long enough for that tonic ability to kick in. And I think the more that people can hear stories like yours and like mine, and know that something else is possible, and have another reference point outside of that mainstream narrative, is powerful. That we have to keep sharing like this among ourselves and having this conversation among ourselves of, well, what else is possible. It's like, well, this happened, this was possible for me, why couldn't it be possible for you? And then there's all of the other possibilities that are beyond that, even beyond physically ingesting a plant.
Yeah.
That's why I love talking about these the psychological and the emotional and the spiritual, because we are all of those bodies. We are not just a physical body. And so, yeah, it's beautiful what you share, Jamie. I really appreciate it. And I feel like we're coming up at the end of our time. So did you want to close with anything? Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us about your journey with red clover?
Oh, gosh, probably so much. But I think
Right?
really it's just like, even you just asking to do this interview was a call. It's opened all of this up and those questions, and just reading your the divinate. Well, I read the whole Red Clover, reread the Red Clover from your
Thank
book,
you.
Wisdom of the Plant Devas. Because that is definitely a book where I've picked up many times, and you read a paragraph and you set it down and you're like, you have to just, be with it
For
because
me
it's,
too. I'm still reading it too. I mean, that book wrote me. I'm still learning from,
yeah.
because it was, a channeled, partially channeled, because of the bridge that it is between botanical medicine and earth spirit medicine, with the divination being the bridge. They're still teaching me too. So we should just do this again.
I know we should do this
We
again.
should do this again.
Yeah, I think what the call is now is it's just um, to get to know her better, and like what we talked about earlier, and just be with that, maybe what we would call new way of being, that presence. But I think it's actually just a really old way. It's a
Yeah.
remembering of how to, we know it very well. So maybe that's helpful for people, is that like we know healing, we know the plants, we know the language very well. We just have to be still enough to remember. And so maybe the word of the day is presence. But yeah, I'll leave you with curiosity. I'm once again very curious and want to just enter that next level of whatever that relationship is. So
It
thank
is in our genetic memory, all of those things that you said, it is in our genetic memory. And if we can, be present enough to remember we are in an unbroken lineage of, my mother, the mother that gave birth to me, and the mother that gave birth to her, and the mother that gave birth to her, and the mother that gave birth to her, in an unbroken lineage.
you.
So we do have this genetic memory if we can be present. I like that word. That's a good word for the day.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being present with me in this moment that we are getting to share. And it's so rich. It's always so rich with you, Jamie. I learned so much from you, and I appreciate you letting me share with you. And to be continued.
To be continued. And thank
All
you for
right.
your stories. I wanted to say one more thing. Stories are
Yeah.
so portal opening. So I think sharing your story really opens portals for people. So thank you for doing that, because that's something that you have a lot of story to share from your life, and just maybe
Oh,
your lineage, not just like your personal, but your mentors and everything.
oh, yeah. Story medicine. Yeah. Story medicine. And now there's a whole field of narrative psychiatry and
Mm,
in narrative psychology, so what story are we telling ourselves about whatever, that, what story am I telling myself about being sick, or what story am I telling myself about being well, or, it's like, I think we really do need to. And when we tell the stories, then we are witnessed in that story, and then it takes on another dimension. It takes on a life of its own, and then again we come into relationship with our story in a different way, because the stories are what make the world. We are literally making the world through our stories. So let's keep telling a good story, and we'll do this again.
all right. Sounds
Awesome.
good.
All
Thanks.
right, see you next time.
Yeah.